We are broadcasting live from the training studio. We are happy to be here. For those of you that might not be fully aware of the QSys brand, we're gonna go through a slight overview of that. But for those of you that might have attended our event, two and a half weeks ago,
Sure.
something like that. This will be a little bit of a recap of some of the really exciting things that we introduced. And so with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Nate.
Sure. So if you're less familiar with QSys already, if there's anything that we want to kind of impress on you about our own history, is that we have a long history of using software to innovate in the place of hardware. Over the course of the entire AV industry, especially over the last 10 years or so, there's been a couple of different mentalities. There's the mentality of having separate boxes. You got a box that does audio and a box that does video and a box that does control, and then people that kind of got to figure out how to make all those boxes talk to each other. And while that's been happening throughout the entirety of QSys maturing, we went the different path of saying, no, that should be one box. That should be one box that does integrated audio, video, and control at the same time. It makes all of the communication between those different aspects of your installation natural and easy, right? And it also, we're employing standard IT technology. We're not reinventing how communication goes across the network. We're using network protocols that everyone in the IT industry already understands. As you've seen us progress throughout the years, you've seen some of the benefits of this mentality. Back when we added acoustic echo canceling into the suites, originally there was not acoustic echo canceling. Eventually we were able to add it, and rather than have to sell a new chipset to make that possible, we could just add it as a free upgrade into the software, because there's already the headroom available, because we're using the processing power that we've got, that allows us to just add it as software rather than hardware. Same idea back in 2016 when we took the operating system, we decoupled it from our hardware. Rather than taking one of our cores, you could take it off the core and apply it onto an off-the-shelf server, when that was happening with the Core 5200, large enterprise style core. And more recently, the same mentality takes place when we're introducing feature licenses and scaling licenses, the ability to expand the capability of your cores and what they can do, expanding your systems at the software level, rather than adding more pieces of iron into the situation. So with that same idea, we are hoping to kind of take you along with us as we're hoping to change what you expect from an AV system and an AV ecosystem. And that feeds right into our first products that we want to announce today, which is heavily with QSys Control. So imagine taking all of the things that you can do with QSys Control, monitoring your system, connecting with help desk services, automating, you name it, in the room, whatever third-party device it is you need to connect to. QSys Control can do all of that, and now you can do it from a PC without using any of our hardware at all. And that's made possible with this, the QSys vCore, which is our first virtualized core processor.
That's right, Nate. That is scalability at fully that software level. This is a virtualized processor that you put on any PC or any server and delivers key components of that QSys OS, depending on which feature license you do. So ultimately, vCore is just a blank platform for you to decide which parts of the QSys OS that you'd like to deploy. And so again, this effort from QSys is in its infancy, and so we decided to, right out of the gate, to start with control in a virtualized state. So at the moment, we're not talking about things like audio and video. It's just control. But essentially what the combination of the vCore platform and that license will do is unlock the full force of the QSys control engine. So we're talking about automation, enhanced user experience, remote monitoring and management for those installations that, financially it wouldn't have made sense to put a core in. Now you can invoke that. The other thing that it's going to do is allow you to control key pieces of the QSys portfolio that are related to control. So I'm talking about, for example, we have modules, for those of you that are not aware, called the QIO series. And we have 3 specific models right now, and we're planning to grow that platform that are dedicated to control. So again, these are boxes that are going to allow you to integrate pieces of third party into a virtualized control processing platform. The other thing that it's going to do is also enable a touchscreen to enter this room. So it also means that you can design and control the experience of your user and add any touchscreen to any system. And that also includes not just the physical touchscreens that we sell, but also the virtual touchscreens like UCI Viewer and our iOS app. Control can come in many forms, and we're going to support that with vCore.
So let's talk about use cases. Where does this go?
Yeah.
Why if it doesn't do audio, where are you going to put it? Well, I mean, the reality is there's actually a lot of applications that maybe you've already got the audio video handled, right? If you're renovating a room that's got the audio and video that's already handled by another manufacturer, you've got maybe a video and audio bar for conferencing calls, things like that, but you still need to control the room. That is the sweet spot for something like the vCore. When we talk to our integrators out there, a lot of times they say that just figuring out how to control the display in the room can be one of the biggest pain points. So that's what vCore is there for. It can help you automate that display, based on activity and things that are taking place in the room. With all of the power of QSys control, you can reach out and talk to the lighting controllers in the room. You can communicate with the occupancy sensors. Anything that you need to make happen in that room is what QSys is already kind of designed for. And so that can happen regardless of whether or not we're handling the audio and video in the room. Also, really worth noting that if the room is integrating with a conferencing application like Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, etc., some of those rooms have a dedicated control platform already, a control GUI that we can actually send our GUI to as well. So you can get a second screen experience on the glass that's already in the room, and that page will then give you access to all of the things that the vCore is controlling, whether that is the lighting, whether that is the shades, whether that, again, you're talking with contact closures, whether the doors are open, things like that. All of that is now accessible because you're using the vCore. And also, these rooms, generally speaking, maybe they're a bit more on the bespoke side of things, that they're a little bit smaller than you might normally consider getting monitoring and management tools onto. Well, you don't need to worry about that anymore because we can now bridge that service gap to these smaller rooms by using QSys Reflect Enterprise Manager, which is something that obviously is going to connect natively with vCore, meaning that you can get diagnostics about what's happening in that room. You can get troubleshooting help in the room. If the users don't know how to interact with the touchscreen in a certain way, you can have someone that's a remote personnel come in, not come in, but virtually come in and assist them remotely to interact with that system. All of these things it's just a level of service that you wouldn't have been able to provide to these smaller rooms. But now it's very easy to do so.
Yeah, I mean, and the reality too is that a lot of those huddle room scenarios with the single bars, a lot of those solutions don't have available remote monitoring and management capabilities. And that's kind of what vCore will bring too, is that because we have this open API, and as long as your device has an open API, you're able to connect it and basically put the entire AV on a single pane of glass. We're done talking about huddle rooms. Let's talk about vCore in a larger room like this, because vCore can also hit its stride in here too. So let's talk about a very likely scenario, whereas you might have a room, a legacy room that's controlled by a non-QSys legacy DSP, and you've got an aging control system that you want to upgrade. You kind of have 2 scenarios, one of which is you have to rip and replace the entire DSP in order to kind of bring new control to that table. We're saying if in the case that is not financially acceptable, or you're, for whatever reason, you just want to add a new control system to an existing large-scale boardroom, vCore can deliver that. So you can, very easily add vCore to this solution and then throw in a QSys touchscreen, and then control everything in the room, whether it's QSys or not. And then the reality is that because QSys control is the same QSys control on vCore as it is on Core 110 and all of our control processing, it means that when this room eventually, hopefully for us, eventually it becomes a full QSys system, you get to take that control programming with you. And that's because it's the same software across our entire core processing suite. Okay, so let's take a look. We mainly covered this in visuals, but let's actually throw a huddle space up on the stream right now and talk about those individual pieces. So here's that huddle space that Nate was talking about. We have the all-in-one UC bar that's got the camera and the microphone and the loudspeaker in there, and it's networked, obviously. And then when you throw that PC in there and add vCore with that license, what you're going to do is you're going to gain control over that touchscreen. You're also going to be able to throw things in like the HVAC and the lighting control and that display that Nate mentioned is so elusive for some of these simple solutions. vCore is going to offer a much more automated, streamlined for this situation. There also might be some folks out there that are hearing the word virtualized and getting a little bit of anxiety, and we fully understand that. That makes sense. So let's go through what that process actually looks like. What is a hypervisor? How do you load it? Because the reality is it is not as difficult as it sounds. You're going to start with a simple download from the QSys website. So you're going to download the vCore image. And then you're going to mount that onto a supported hypervisor of your choosing, of which we have 3 to choose from. And then you're going to, like I said, this is paired with a license, so you're going to, through your regular sales channel, you're going to purchase that license and then activate it onto your imaged hypervisor. And again, very, very simple. And in fact, I've seen a demonstration of this entire process. Most of it is actually just waiting for the vCore to mount onto your hypervisor. So go get a cup of coffee and then load that license. And effectively, that's all that it takes to create a virtualized control processor on whatever device you choose.
All right, so that's the vCore. Moving from the vCore, we got a couple of other products we want to tell you about. First one is actually another core. This core is following in that same idea I was talking about earlier about taking the operating system off of our hardware and applying it onto off-the-shelf server technology.
Invoked by software.
Exactly. Yeah. And so with that in mind, we are happy to introduce the new Core 610 processor, which is another, off-the-shelf. You can see the word Dell on there, server for us to apply the core operating system onto. The operating system, QSys was always designed to be powerful, but also portable. The idea was to be able to remove it from our gear. We did that with the Core 5200. As I said earlier, with that large enterprise-style core, this core is intended more for a little bit more down-market applications, something a little bit more mid-tier, where you're not going to be doing something as large as the 5200 is, but it's more complicated than a Core 110F or even a couple of Core 110Fs to add them together. Let's look at the specs on this thing.
Yeah, let's take a look. So again, I'll speak momentarily for those of you that may be aware of our core offering, and then I'll tell about the differences. So those of you that might be aware of our Core 510 processor, the first half of these specs are going to look relatively similar. You got 256 by 256 audio channels. You've got plenty of capability to do collaboration with 64 channels of echo cancellation, 64 channels of VoIP, and up to 16, the capability of loading up to 16 of our upcoming network microphones. So far, feels very much like the 510. But this is kind of where that software story begins to kick in, because available quite soon thereafter when we release the 610, we're also going to release a scaling license, the ability to make this processor more than it is right now, depending on your need to right size. And Nate's going to talk a little bit about that, so I don't want to steal his thunder. The other thing that it's going to introduce is a new software-based Dante tier. For those of you that want to use Dante in certain applications, you're going to have the ability to buy a separate software-based Dante license and move that core up to 256 by 256. a couple of different differentiators. The 510, it's got a larger hard drive. So if you're thinking about putting this into a museum installation or somewhere that has a lot of media files that are that require a lot of hard drive, on our smaller core processors, you might have to upgrade to a larger hard drive. With 480 gigabytes of memory, I think you won't need to, and you can't actually do that on this core. The last thing that it has that the others don't is an additional auxiliary port. Like all QSys cores, you're able to do two network ports for QLAN, so redundancy in that regard, but you get two auxiliary ports. And this becomes really helpful if you want to do things like put all of your IT services or your VoIP services or your remote monitoring and management onto different NICs. You have an additional NIC to choose from.
So Patrick did indeed steal my thunder. I want to talk to you about that scaling license. Again, one of the advantages that this core has over the 510 is the ability to scale its processing power if you discover that your system does indeed need to grow beyond those original expectations of all those stats. So when Patrick was talking about the number of network audio channels, the number of AEC channels, the number of network microphones it can handle, generally speaking, across the board, the scaling feature license for the 610 is going to give you about 50% more of all of those things. So rather than 256 channels, you're going to have 384 channels in and out for the network ins and outs. Same thing with the acoustic echo canceling. Same thing with the number of network streaming channels. And same thing with the number of microphones and media capacity. So all of that, again, allows you to scale up just with a software license, no additional hardware to apply, no additional chipsets you need to somehow get and integrate. You can just bring it up to a little bit larger scenario. And if you're used to thinking about in-room cores or distributed processing throughout a number of rooms in a larger building, you have a number of core 110Fs or something like that that is servicing a number of smaller rooms in a large building. This is really about shifting that mentality closer to a centralized processing architect, right? This is where you have one monolithic building and you want to make sure that you've got one processor that's handling everything, and you're really relying on the power of the network to get everything to that core. So you're going to be using maybe those QIO devices that Patrick talked about earlier, where you can take the inputs and outputs, put them geographically close to the microphones and loudspeakers, whatever it is that they are servicing, and then use the network to transport that across the building to wherever that core happens to be situated, and then back again. So it's a really good foray into centralized processing versus distributed processing.
Okay. 2 out of 3 done. We're going to continue down the software conversation with one more software introduction. And this is aimed at, again, taking an existing piece of QSys product and enabling it with software. In this case, we're going to do so in the collaboration space itself and enable one of our touchscreens to become a bridging location for the rest of the system. And we're doing so with the AV bridging license by QSys. Now, we introduced these touchscreens, Nate, about 9 months ago?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and we didn't do a whole lot of advertising about some of the pieces of hardware that are on the back. We talked about the network jack, but we didn't talk about one little guy that we're going to feature right now.
Well, you had to open it up to even see it.
Exactly. For those of you that saw the introduction, you didn't hear us talk about that USB-C port, and that was by design, because realistically, we were still building the AV bridging license. But ultimately, when you get this bridging license, not only can you continue to use the cradle that you purchased for this, because there is a pre-existing hole that is going to allow you to thread both your Cat5 and your USB cable, but at that point, it becomes a co-located bridge for AV bridging. And so what I'm speaking specifically about is BYOD. So in most scenarios, you're going to have a compute device that is running, Microsoft Teams, Google, Zoom. But in a lot of cases, you're going to need a bring your own device scenario, a bridge to kind of bring a laptop and allow that laptop to take control of the room's AV technology. That is essentially what the AV bridging license is doing. It's taking an existing piece of hardware that was already on the table, you've already paid for it, and you can enable this functionality with software, and in fact, you can do so without ever putting boots on the ground. This is completely deployable online. And then the other thing that I'm going to point out again, you're removing a piece of hardware from that scenario. And Nate, I'm stealing your thunder again, but I'm speaking specifically to our supply chain challenges and how this is going to address that.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. If you can't get your hands on one of the other devices that would handle this AV bridging feature for you normally, well, you've already got it. It's right there. It's in the touchscreen already. So you don't need to make sure that you've got this other device that's dedicated just for that. It's another example of how we can use software to accommodate for less hardware. Just apply the license instead, and then you don't need to get that other plug-in there. And as far as licensing goes as well, if you're used to QSys already, you know how easy it is to deploy these licenses. It's handled through the core manager that's connected to your core already. It's only a couple of clicks, very easy to employ. And also worth noting that this is a license per touchscreen that requires this bridge. So if you've got 10 touchscreens, you don't need to apply a license on every single one of them. You're only going to apply the ones that require the AV bridging connection, which also means that it's very easy to expand that system again later on. If you discover that you do need to add AV bridging to maybe some of the other touchscreens, you can apply that down the line very easily.
Man, we've made it to the end.
Yeah.
I think this is where we're gonna. I'm gonna turn my little monitor back on, and we're gonna open it up, hopefully for some inquiring minds that, that have questions for us on the content or on our ruggedly good
some
looks.
Questions.
We'll take
actually, we also have some comments.
We like both.
Someone recognizes Nate from Level 1 training videos. Nate,
course.
is that you? Are you
It is
Level
me,
1 training video?
And my
superstar?
favorite thing about what you just said is that you recognize me from the Level 1 training videos, even though Patrick was just as much in every single one of those videos. So I appreciate that I have a memorable face.
You hurt my feelings,
and
whoever wrote that
Patrick's
comment.
got the kind of face that your gaze just glances off of accidentally. I appreciate
Nate's
that.
face is like a train wreck. You don't want to ever miss it.
The answer is yes, that's us.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us more about those training videos?
Of course, if you want to learn more about how to use QSys, go to training.qsys.com. We are big advocates of making sure that training is free and accessible to everyone and easy to digest. So if you want to learn how to use the software, going to Level 1 training for your first foray into QSys. It'll take you step by step through all of the products of what QSys is, how to start implementing it, and we try to do so. Hopefully, maybe you got a little bit of that in the course of the last 25 minutes. We try to do so with a little bit of humor. We know that there's training out there in the world that is dry and impossible to digest, and you just want to sit there and let your eyes turn to stone watching. We do our best to get a little bit of comedy in there, so that you can at least stay awake while it's happening, and it's been successful for us. So
that's probably why you put us at the end of the agenda. You knew that we were good closers. We knew that we were going to wake up the rest of the people that were diligent enough to join for as long as you did. So thank you for everybody that joined us, by the way.
Well, we're not quite done yet. We have 2 more questions.
Let's do it.
A question and a comment. The first question is, can you please talk about the 2-way help communication via the touch panel?
Say that again.
the 2-way help communication. So
Oh, great. Yeah, I can do that.
yeah, go take it.
So ultimately, that touchscreen can be a vehicle for a user to deliver control changes within the room. But depending on how you build your system, and if you are employing, for example, QSys Reflect Enterprise Manager, we've seen a lot of customers build help desk scenarios. So, for example, you get into the room and God forbid, you can't get it figured out. The audio is not working. And so you could, if you wanted to, program a help screen that says, I need help with the audio. And where that goes is that goes to QSys Reflect Enterprise Manager, and depending on how the integrator has set it up, it will either hit a managed service provider or somebody that's in-house and provide them a notification that something is going wrong in the room, and offers via QSys Reflect Enterprise Manager a couple of different opportunities to create some help desking. So for example, with Enterprise Manager, that person could pull up a display screen and see that, oh, your mute button is muted. Let me just remotely unmute that for you. They also have the ability to audit event logs. So if something happened overnight and an amplifier went down, we will have been able to see that. That gets logged, and hopefully the Shangri-La is that if something like that happens, we're able to put boots on the ground before the end user ever gets there. But again, that touchscreen and the ability to invoke help desk on the touchscreen is more of a, if you can assist a customer in the immediate with something that's obvious to somebody who's used the system, but maybe not to somebody that's just kind of jumped into the system, somebody remotely can just go in there and make a change and get the meeting started.
I'll give you another scenario too, where because we can integrate with so many other things. I've seen some good integrations where something happens that you need trouble with in the system. We can connect that to a webhook that'll go to your Microsoft Teams channel, so that someone who's on the Teams group will be notified whatever. If you're using Teams for your corporation, you get a notification internal that says, "Hey, someone needs help in this room," and then you can communicate back with them using the communication protocol that you prefer. So there's a lot of ways that you can do anything that happens inside QSys to alert the people that need to help you.
Yeah.